Hello, I want to introduce you to, and let you see something that I thought I would never see, much less own in my lifetime. This is being shot in my shop. This video was being made in my shop and handheld, so it's going to be a little shaky. But what you see in front of you is a genuine Gold Divers 4-inch dredge. You see the couple jet on the right. This is a 4-inch couple jet. It came in 2.5, 3, 4, and 6-inch sizes. The Quick Connect, of course, is my own addition. You see the sluice box inside the carry frame. That's in the stowed position. You see the engine and water pump in the proper orientation, although you also see it on a modern day dredge engine mount. That's just for storage purposes. You see a Y connector on the output of the pump. That's also an addition for myself, and I'll explain that later. The original owner bought this new about 1990, roughly 30 years ago, with a Briggs engine on it. He hated the engine because it always smoked. I guess it was an aluminum piston with an aluminum block. And he took the engine, threw it away, took it off, and put a GX160 on it. However, in order to make the GX160 work, he had to separate the air compressor mount from the water pump mount. More on that later. So you can see the Gold Divers water pump. It's a 2 in and 2 out. Very interesting. You'll also see that the input is threaded. I haven't seen any other dredge pump like this threaded ever in my 10 years of dredging. This is the sluice box coming into view. Again, it's in the stowed position. The air compressor is a Teledyne Sprague, S-P-R-A-G-U-E. I haven't been able to find any information on it anywhere. You see me moving in front of my light, the shadows there. The engine is a reconditioned 5-horse original type of Briggs. Since the original engine did not come with it, I had commissioned this engine to be built to replicate the engine most closely that came with the dredge. I had a few changes made. One, it's now a solid state coil, and it's got a slightly larger jet in the carburetor. But it puts out more than enough power to make this dredge work. Again, we're sliding on around, so you can see the entirety of the dredge. The two tubes you see, the longitudinal tubes running along the length of the sluice box, were there to support the dredge on the inner tubes. It actually floats on inner tubes when in operation. This made it one of the lightest dredges production at the time in the late 80s, early 90s. Again, let me move down so you can see the couple jet. And as we continue to slide around, again, you see my shadow as we move around the lights. And now what I'll do is start assembling it and put it in operational mode so you can see what the sluice box and the mount look like when deployed. This is the Gold Divers dredge, fully assembled just without the floats on it. And of course the engine and power pack is still on the temporary stand, the storage stand, because I didn't want to make a big deal out of mounting it. And it's kind of heavy. So you see, I can't even get back far enough in my shop to get a good shot of this, but you'll see it as I move around. You see the couple jet, the jet log on the left that feeds the sluice box on the right. As I pan to the right, you'll see the two supports under which they would be attached to two very large inner tubes. The larger in the rear to support the weight of the water in the jet log and the power pack. A smaller tube to the front, supporting the weight of the sluice box. Let's cruise around again so you can see what it looks like from all angles. You can see the output of the water pump is just beyond the input of the jet log. So for that, because of the extension I put on there, I'm going to have to put a curling pipe that comes out and curls back and then goes into the jet log. While I'm here at the jet log, let me give you a close-up of some of the specifics here. You see in the foreground a water intake. This is where you could get utility water. However, for spraying and your blaster line, I chose to utilize a Y connector, as you can see here in this configuration. So I doubt I'll be using the one provided by Mr. Chile. You see a quick connect that I added, so I didn't destroy the threads on the 2-inch intake, and a suction gauge, a for real pressure gauge on the bell housing. Now, what you do is you with the adjustment screw that you see just below the pressure gauge, you can actually move in and out the adjustable side of the jet log, and to get the pressure you want to maintain the altitude for any given altitude wherein you might be operating. Remember that a piston engine, all piston engines lose 3% of their power for every 1,000 feet of altitude that they operate higher than sea level. So you can actually adjust your jet log to maintain, to obtain, the greatest amount of water output, the volume that'll allow you to get the most suction at the nozzle. I'm operating just outside of Montgomery, Alabama at about a 600-foot elevation, so let's call it sea level. I'm operating between 35 and 40 psi, and I set that with the 2 screws you see just below the gauge. Moving back out and coming around to the front, you see my shadow moving in front of the lights. The air gauge on the air compressor pump. And you see the pop-off valve and the attachment. If you can get a little closer, you'll see the model number and the serial number of this particular compressor. And you see how it's mounted on the engine mount. It's sideways. However, you can turn this engine vertically, but that presents other problems in their own right. So let me back out. There's the power pack, and again on this side of the sluice box, you see the top of the crash box. You see there's no flap on this, and this is original design. There is no flap there. When I get into the sluice box specifically, you'll also see that there's no upper mat. This is all by design. This is a very clever design. I have not seen this design in use in the decade that I've been dredging, and I've owned 8 dredges in my life. This is the 9th one, and this is by far the most interesting dredge I've ever had, simply because I don't see this technology anymore. You see the 2 braces that attach the sluice box, that brace the sluice box to the frame. You see the miter's moss and the riffles. And you see the support at the toe of the sluice box wherein a inner tube is attached and connected. And if you look closely, you can see my little dog there in the background. He's resting on his bed. Moving on around the sluice box, well now, and we complete our tour back where we started. What I'll do when we come back is take a look at the power pack up close. We'll take a look at all the major components, the power pack, the jet log, and the sluice box and the frame. Okay, be right back. So here we are in front of the sluice, looking through the top of the sluice box. I've got the top of the crash box off, and we're looking at a tang. I don't know what else to call it but a tang, so let me walk around and walk in front of the light there. Let me get my pointer. This is the area that catches the lip of the crash box. The water comes in and hits this tang. As you can see, it's spring steel. That's all it is. And the little ears here is bent here on the side, each corner have little ears. So apparently what happens when water comes in, it comes in, hits this tang. Of course, a lot of it just is bounced up into, reflected up into the top of the crash box. These two little ears give it a curl back. You can see the action, I'm sure, in your mind's eye. Now, the top of the sluice box, the crash box, excuse me, the top of the crash box is very cleverly designed. Now, this is going to be a little bit because I'm running out of hands to use to make my demonstration here. So let me just pick it up with my other hand. It would fit on top of the box like this. You can see the patterns that are made by the ears. But what's most interesting is the fact that the end is actually curved. You see that bend there? It's 45 degrees back. That's what creates the Z pattern in the water flow. Very, very cool. So the water flow, the water flow bounces off the top of the crash box lid, comes back into this area, is churning and churning and churning, and then the punch plate smooths the water flow. This is a 1/4 inch. Underneath it looks like something about an 1/8 inch, maybe 3/16, something like that. Probably an 1/8, 2/16. This is 4/16. Now we'll pick up the punch plates, which are you can see now the lip under which the punch plates fit. This holds the punch plates in place. This is the tang, and there is no upper mat. Nothing. By design. That's the way it was originally designed. I have never seen a dredge that had no upper plate, no upper mat. That's just amazing. Now, you can also see that there's nothing on the front end anchoring the riffles. So I'll set my pointer stick down, get the punch plates out of the way, set them down, and then we'll lift up on the riffles and notice that they just slide out from under the keepers down there. And that's it, the little rollers. They just slide out. Now how clever is that? Underneath the miner's moss, there is nothing. That's it. That's the whole sluice box. Now let me show you a couple of clever design parts that make this whole thing work. First of all, have you ever seen a sluice box with a nugget trap? You can see a close-up of it there. It's actually a little nugget trap. Second, notice that the sluice box has a lip in it all the way around to include, I'll have to move out of the light pretty quickly here, to include the top all the way down. So this has a channel bent into it from the factory. It is this back channel here into which makes this crash box work. I'm moving both hands here to make everything work, to see if I can get this explanation and demonstration in. You'll see the lip on the bottom of the crash box lid, and that's what makes the seal, the water seal. So you have to lay it off to the sides. pull it forward, and you might have to bump it a little bit on the back. A third hand at this point would be extremely handy. It fits on the lip in the back. And that's the trick of the sluice box. Very cleverly designed and very minimalistic. And it was a gold catcher. The gentleman that I bought this from assured me that it was a gold catching machine. And he ran it for 20 years before I got it. He ran it for 20 years. It was in storage for 10. And in October of 2019, I drove to Northern California and got this, bought it from him. Okay, I'm going to break for a moment here, and next we're going to talk about the jet log. What you see in front of you is, as far as dredgers go, one of the most fabled pieces of gear ever. This is the true unicorn. In combination with the water pump, the couple jet. This couple jet is unique in the fact that, well, there's just none in existence that I've ever seen. I've looked at pictures of some, I've looked at a lot of diagrams of them, but I've never physically seen one or held one in my hands until I had a chance to buy this one. And it's amazing. This is the input side. This is the adjustable side. As you can see, these are the adjustment screws. These are 9/16 adjustment screws. I added the pressure gauge. This particular jet log works best between 35 and 40 psi. I get the greatest volume of water out of the discharge in. And the suction here is just unbelievable. It is, you can actually feel it with your hand, even when you don't have a suction line on it. You don't have the nozzle line on it. It just tests in the creek in my backyard. I found it to be incredible. This is the clamp that goes on the tang that holds it in place, that connects this to the frame. This is the utility water, which I'll probably never use. We've already talked about the pressure gauge, the 2-inch quick connect adapter. I added this just so I won't damage the threads on the 2-inch input. This is the collar that makes it all work. Water goes in, and 90 degrees later, comes back out the discharge in. You would think that because there's such a great change in direction that it wouldn't be very efficient. The documentation I have on this particular dredge from Mr. Chile, which came from the original owner, says this has a factor of 1.76. What that means is for every gallon of water that goes into it, 1.76 gallons comes back out. That is amazing. Looking through the business end. Looking at some of the casting information. This is a Series E. I wish I knew what that meant. On the other side, you see it does say Gold Diver, Hawthorne, California. Gold Divers was based in southern Nevada, and they sold mainly into the West Coast, west of the Rockies. You know, California, Colorado, Washington State, Oregon, and Alaska. The gentleman I bought this from said a friend had called him that had a 6-inch couple jet in Alaska, and when asked how he described his couple jet, the word he used was beast. It was just a beast. So I find it nothing more than absolutely fascinating. that this is certainly not brand new. It's about 35 to 40 years old, and it's in my shop. It's unbelievable. Next, we will talk about the power pack, and be right back. What you see is, with the exception of the engine and the Y connector and the mount, of course, is a recreation, a replication, if you will, of the Gold Divers power pack. So let's go through this a piece at a time, starting with, of course, the pump. 2 in, 2 out, and stamped here on the volute is the number 2. I suppose that can only mean this is a 2-inch volute. He might have used the same pump system for several other sizes, maybe a 3, smaller impeller with this same volute. What you can't see on the inside, there's a stainless steel sealing ring. I don't have a light that'll show you that, but it's stainless steel, and it's no other pump maker does that. Secondarily, in this market, as you can see, the throat is threaded for the suction line. There's not a clamp that goes on there, but it's actually a threaded piece. Very interesting. Now, just over the volute, as I said earlier, the original owner cut the motor mount in half so he could put the new GX160 on it, and he had to mount the air compressor to the side. As you can see, the weld right here, this is where the 2 pieces were reconnected. So, as you can see, this is the original air compressor. It's mounted what you and I would say sideways. It's mounted properly for the time. You also see a link belt. I prefer a link belt because if you ever break a belt when you're dredging, and you never break a belt in your shop, but only when you're in operation, you're pretty much shut down for the day because you got to take it down, go back to your shop, take it all apart, replace the belt, put it all back together, and then you're ready another day. With the link belt, if you break the belt, you can quickly take it off, add replace links as necessary, and put it back together, and you're up and running again in a half hour or less. Now, in the original configuration, you see this Y connector was not there. I added it because I like them. It makes it much easier to flood the volute for initial engine start. Like all dredges, this has to be completely primed and flooded for the engine, so you don't burn your ceramic bearings. So what I do is I close the main valve, I open the secondary here, the 1-inch valve. This is where I put a diaphragm pump, and I use that to suck water into and flood this pump. Let me get it back on screen here. I flood this pump using this valve with a bellows pump. Then I crank the engine. This pump is already flooded, so it's 100% and guaranteed to be flooded and working properly. So I let the engine warm a little bit, and then I close off the bellows pump, add my blaster line, turn this valve on, and now I have water going to the jet log. Coming around this side, you saw the jet log, where the jet log connects. It connects about here. So I'm going to have this is my air intake for the air compressor. So there'll be a 90-degree attachment here and bringing it up, so hopefully I won't be inhaling engine exhaust. You see a 4-way connector here, so I can add an air compressor gauge, an air gauge. This is the air hookup, the male side, of course the pop-off valve. You're familiar with this side. We've already seen this side of the air pump. This engine was built for me in Cleveland, Tennessee by a gentleman who is a Briggs dealer, and he builds racing engines, and he builds them very well. If you want information on that gentleman, I can furnish it to you. Coming on around, you see pump, the carburetor, the exhaust pipe, the air cleaner, all the piping and everything necessary for the engine to work. You see in here, let me get my pointer stick, the pulley here is correct for this size engine and for the pulley on the air compressor so as not to overspeed the air compressor. And coming on around and bumping into my light stand, we have returned to where we began our tour of the Power Pack. So this is the Gold Diver Dredge. I believe it to be the only surviving 4-inch Gold Diver Dredge east of the Rockies. There are no others that I'm aware of that I can find online, and it's 90% genuinely correct and original. Of course, there's a replacement engine. The Y connector can come off if you want to go back to totally original, but then it's just more difficult, in my opinion, to flood the pump, to make sure the pump is fully flooded, because there's not a monitor valve here. So I use this for flooding the pump for startup and for my blaster line. Finally, let me come back around. I can find almost no information on this pump. I have a rebuild kit from the original owner. I have some parts, but nothing else. There's just very little to no information on this. You can see there is the information right there on the tag. You have serial number, model number, Teledyne Sprague. To me, it's very interesting. And to the inside here, you might be able to, let's see if I can get this correct here. There's the weld. You can see it all the way down there. A very good friend of mine with a really crackerjack machine shop was able to put these two pieces back together for me in such a way that the angle of the pulley, of the air compressor pulley, was perfect for the drive pulley on the engine. Okay, that's it. That's all I've got. You have now seen the setup. In a later video, I'll show it to you, show this machine to you with the inner tubes inflated, and then if I get enough water, get lucky, I can get it out on a lake or a fair-sized stream someplace and actually do some dredging with it and demonstrate that. If you have any comments, of course, just leave them below. And happy dredging. Stay safe out there. And hopefully talk to you later. Bye now.